All right, viewers and listeners, if you're out there, this is our first official Google Hangout, our Motivate podcast. I'm Kurt Clapier, and a little bit about my background since this is new. Before I introduce you to our guest, I am a high school teacher and wrestling coach at a Title I school in West Valley City, Utah. And what a Title I school is it's a school that has a high number, according to the national averages, a high number of students that are in poverty-like situations so that they qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so we have some unique challenges at that school, and it's got me really thinking about motivation and what motivates certain people to really be driven and to really strive to do excellent things and great things in whatever aspect of life they choose to, versus people that are content with mediocrity and not pursuing their dreams and things like that. So that's the reason I started this podcast. It will hopefully turn into something more, but I'm here with a friend of mine. His name's Mark Robbins, and I've known Mark forever. I'll introduce you to him here in a second. I grew up wrestling with his younger brother. We were the same age, and so Mark was like an older brother to me. Growing up, and in recent years, he's become quite the ultra runner. He runs these crazy 100-mile races and things like that. And somehow, in between all his running, he finds the time to be a father to 3 kids. So, Mark, how you doing?
Good, Kurt. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
Good. So Mark, just a little bit of background about you. I know you have 3 kids. I know you're quite a bit ahead of me in that regard. You got a 16-year-old. I can't believe that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. She goes to high school, and I've got a son who's 14 and another son who's 13. So I'm moving through. I'm going to be done here before too long.
And I noticed, at least with your son, you've got him into running. Is that right?
Yeah. A little junkie. In fact, he runs cross country up at Churchill Junior High, which is where you and I went. And,
Yep.
it was kind of fun to go to some of his meets this year. His coach is the same coach that I had in my 7th grade year of cross country. So cool to have that with him and also with that teacher.
Is it Wagner still?
Yeah, Debbie Wagner,
Really?
2-time Wasatch 100 winner.
Really? I knew she always ran those, but I didn't know that she won
Yeah.
them.
Yeah, she's a 2-time champ. Amazing teacher.
That's crazy. That's crazy. 2-time champ. Well, Mark, we're going to get into and talk a little about running, how you got into running, and why you're so passionate about it, and then kind of see how we can take what you've learned from running and use that to motivate us in whatever it is we need motivation in, whether that's to lose weight, whether that's to start a business or find a better job, or for students to pass high school, things like that. But I don't mean to brag, Mark, but I know you run, but I don't know if you've ever earned one of these. This is from the Snow Canyon Half Marathon. Half marathons, you may or may not know, they're 13.1 miles. You ever ran that far?
A lot. I think that I have a few times, but 1 miles is no joke, especially on pavement. I think running those on pavement is
right. And it was at one time, like a lot of people have ran 13 miles, like a mile a day for 13 days, but I did this in one day.
Yeah, in one sitting.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of you, Kurt. You've come a long ways.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks. So Mark, a few years ago, in fact, I didn't even know you were into running. I didn't even know you did cross country in junior high. But a few years ago, all of a sudden, I see these posts on social media about you doing the Wasatch 100, and I was like, "What? Are you serious?" So I started looking into it, and how'd this all start? Back up and tell me how you got into running.
Good question as to how it all started. So in 5, I had reached a pinnacle in my weight. I was severely out of shape, and about that same time, my little brother's wife passed away, and we decided that we were going to run a 5K. It was the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer Awareness 5K, and I was severely out of shape, but kind of as my recently passed sister-in-law, I wanted to run the entire thing without walking, and that a 5K is 3.1 miles, but at the time that seemed huge stretch for me. So I didn't even train, just went and ran off the couch and was able to do that. And sense of accomplishment that gave me kind of lit a spark. In 2007, I ran my first marathon and got to the finish line and thought that was cool and it was inspiring and me, but I still hadn't quenched the thirst that I had, so to speak. And in 2010, I was driving down Parley's Canyon one night and saw these bright lights and was trying to figure out what they were. And I had a friend tell me that it was a 100-mile endurance race. I heard that there was such a thing, kind of really piqued my interest. So I started to look into what the Wasatch 100 was. And if you're not familiar with what it is, goes from Layton, Utah, all the way to Midway. And it's 100 miles that you run at one time without stopping. It's got 26,000 feet of vertical climb miles. So it's up and down the mountains, of the Wasatch Mountains. So anyway, I into it in 2011. I volunteered at the race just to see what it looked like. And the first runner that I saw come through the aid station that I was volunteering at just me, and I ended up putting into the lottery for the race the next year, was drawn, and ran the Wasatch 100 in 2012 for the first time.
That's crazy. Now, I've been reading about 100-mile races, and am I right? Isn't the Wasatch 100 among some of the tougher ones in the country?
Yeah, it's widely known as a classic. There's a few different grand slams of ultra running, and Wasatch is included in each of those. It's kind of it's not the granddaddy, but it's definitely a major. I think people would debatable as to which one's the hardest, but it's definitely in the top 5 most difficult. I personally think it's top. It's a hard race. There's a lot of uphill in it, and you just every time that you feel like you can start to run good and find a rhythm, there's just more vert staring you right in the face.
Now, ultra running is anything bigger than a marathon, is that right?
Anything over 26.2 miles is considered an ultra marathon.
Okay. Yeah, right when we were getting ready to start this call, I asked Mark if he was training for anything. He goes, nothing major, just a 50K, which is what, 33 miles?
It's about that. And that's probably one of the most bizarre things that's happened to me as I've started ultra running. The very first marathon I ran was the Salt Lake Marathon. And me and my family planned for it for months. We planned for days of recovery. I took a couple days off work after the marathon, massages and gift baskets, and it was this huge thing. This marathon was huge, and it's now to the point where last year my wife, I was going out on a training run, and she said, "How far are you going?" I said 28 miles, and she said, "Do you remember when a marathon was a big deal for you?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I kind of remember that." But your brain just shrinks what's possible, and now I don't feel like I'm anything special, but I will go run 28 miles and come home and do a day of yard work and go to the kids' football or soccer games or whatever they have, and take my wife out on a date. It's just almost Saturday now.
I want to talk to you about that because I've gotten into running. I was kind of a runner in junior high, I did cross country and whatnot. My sisters were big runners, but I started getting into it about a year and a half ago, give or take. And for similar reasons, what you said, I wanted to lose some weight, and I've actually lost 25 pounds because of it. But thanks, man. What held me back though at the start were opposite of what you're saying. If I went and did a hard run, I needed a 3-hour nap. And then on top of that, I had some injuries and things. So I want to hear about your experience. When you first started, you started with that 5K, and then you built up to a marathon relatively quickly. And then you decided to do the 100, and now you do ultra marathons pretty regularly. I've met, I guess what I'm asking is I've met people that kind of naturally could just get it and loved it and didn't have a lot of injuries. And I've met other people like myself that have had to battle through injuries. What was your path like? Tell me a little bit about that.
After I feel like I regressed a little bit. And I remember there was one night where I was at Gold's Gym through 1 mile on the treadmill. And I got to the point where consecutive nights I could on the treadmill. And I was really proud of that effort. And then the injuries came, and mine came in the form of shin splints, and my feet hurt. And I knew that that was partially to do with weight, but not totally to do with weight. So I started to research running form and the best ways to run and best ways to recover. And what I found is, as I altered my form, I was able to have run basically injury free. And it's pretty, I feel blessed, and I know it's crazy, but I weigh on average at any given time about 205 pounds, and I'm 5'9". So people call me politely, they call me stocky, but if we're being honest, I'm chubby. But I've been able to avoid injury just by committing to understanding good form and form.
What I've read a few books on form, and I've tried to adjust things. I don't think I have the form down yet because I still get some injuries. But what resources did you go to? What kind of form technique have you studied, or what do you do?
If you on form, there's 100 of them out there. And the main thing for me was landing on the midsole or forefoot of my foot rather than hitting with my heel first. When you heel strike, it just sends a shock wave up through your entire body, and you'll see fractures and knee injuries because of that. And that is shorter in a run rather than really trying to stretch it out like some of the Kenyan marathoners are able to. I kind of shorten up my stride and take chip steps, and that's really helped me. In fact, it's why, one of the reasons I've been able to run as long as I have is just because of that simple watching my form. And sometimes when I'm in a race and my body's getting tired and I'm getting fatigued, I can feel my form start to, and I just have to remind myself to go back to the form that I have used to get to where I'm at today.
Why do so many most, I don't know if most is right, but it's probably accurate. Yeah, most people don't ever get past the pain of running, and thus they never experience that runner high. I'm luckily the point that I've experienced that, and I'm somewhat addicted myself, not to the level you are. But what why were you able to get past that? Or what would you say to someone that's tried running but they've never got to the part where it's fun?
I would say that you have to look at it as fun. For me, running was always recreational. I never felt forced to run. And if you're forcing yourself to run, you're already starting off on the wrong foot. So I think the main thing for me was I had certain goals that I wanted to accomplish. And so working towards that goal was really motivating to me. The other thing that happened was I had sadness in my life. I had lost several family members and friends of time, and that weighed heavily on me. And when I went and ran, I found that I was able to shed some of that sadness and really get into a clear headspace and think clearly and process and gain perspective. And so I've heard people say running is therapy, but in the most real sense for me, it was. And for me, I don't personally love to run on pavement. I'd rather be in the trails. Something about being in the mountains and seeing the trees and listening to the sounds that come with the mountains, and then also processing every thought that I have, it has become a necessity in my life. In fact, there's times where I'm a little cantankerous around home, and my wife will lovingly hand me my running shoes and say, "We'll see you in a couple hours. Go get better." And I'm really grateful that I found that. So I would say find a reason to run. If you have a goal, if you want to complete a half marathon or a marathon or a 5K or a 10K, marry that with thinking of somebody else. Oftentimes when I run, I'm doing it for somebody else, and that serves as motivation. But the high will come but you have to start from the right headspace.
That's awesome. As you told that story, I was reminded of a guy I met in a running group I'm involved in. We go on Saturdays, and this guy lost about 100 pounds running and quit smoking because of running. And he told me a similar story to you. He said because he doesn't smoke anymore, he'll get angry sometimes. He'll get upset, and anytime he kind of starts getting upset, his wife hands him his running shoes and kicks him out the door, and he comes back with a clear head.
And I mean, it's scientific. Your body releases endorphins and serotonin, and those things are uppers, and they'll actually, it's not a mental high, it's a real physiological high.
Yeah, I've noticed that even after a hard run, my head's just so much more clear. It's an awesome experience.
Yeah.
I want you to tell one or two more running experiences, and then I want to get into kind of how we can take what you've learned from running and apply it to a business owner or to a student that's struggling in school or wherever anybody wants to apply it. But I want to hear about one of, if not the most, your favorite running experience that you've had. Tell us that story.
And that is such a difficult question because of what we just talked about. There's so many times where I've gone to the woods. One of my favorite quotes is by Henry David Thoreau, and he says, "I went to the woods because I wish to live deliberately." And I have it, that quote hangs. And so going to the woods to live deliberately will give you a lot of neat experiences. But I would say probably the best for me was last year during the Wasatch 100. I was going for my second finish. I've heard that at Wasatch is more difficult than getting your first because you kind of know what to expect. You know how hard the pain is going to be. And that was really true for me. And I got to mile 51. It was getting dark and I was about to go through the night. And I have a good running friend that I've spent many trail miles with who flew in from Oregon to run with me. We had intentionally made a rule that we weren't going to talk to each other months leading up to the race. So we would have tons to talk about through the night and hopefully help us make good time. And during the day, that Friday, I had suffered quite a bit. The temperature was 91 degrees, and I don't run well in heat, and especially being a bigger runner, it zaps me. And a few of the aid stations that I went into were out of ice, and so I got pretty low physically and mentally. But when I hooked up with this guy who was pacing me in ultra running, in several of the races, you're allowed a pacer, and they can't carry anything for you, but they just run alongside of you to kind of pep you up. And you can usually take them about midway through the race. So anyway, I got with him. There's a difficult climb there through Lambs Canyon that short time of, and then we just started passing people. And as a career back of the pack runner, I never really passed people, but that night we ended up passing 41 people. We were laughing the whole time. Large amount of time where I was able to turn off my headlamp and just run by moonlight, which was super fun. Your stomach gets a little uneasy 60, 70 miles into a race, and I vomited at the top of a canyon. It kind of echoed all the way down through the canyon, and we laughed about that for several miles. And each runner we passed, they would say, "Are you the guy that just puked his guts out?" And I was like, that's me. But we made up so much time through the night that really positioned me to finish strong on Saturday. And I was able to finish because of that euphoric night that we spent running through the Wasatch Mountains.
That's a great feeling. I had a really bad run of 15K a month or so ago. Well, it was like 2 or 3 months ago now. And my buddy who I run with, he said to me, "You have to have the bad runs." The bad runs, that sounds like something else. You have to have the bad. You have to have a bad run so that you appreciate the good ones. And so you reminded me of that, talking about puking. I bet that was a miserable experience, but it also made the run that much better, those highs and lows.
Yeah. That's interesting because that race last year was probably my favorite race, and it was my worst outcome. I had my slowest time and I really suffered. But one thing is I reached further into myself and, deep down in my heart and soul to really strength to finish that race. And so finishing that race was really difficult and really challenging, but I taught myself a lot about myself, and that's just how big in life. And I think the one thing that I think is important to note is we all have that within us. We have more than we think we're capable of. And sometimes it takes a hard run like that to notice that. Sometimes it takes passing a hard class at school or getting through some tragedy in your life, but strength and courage within us that this ultra running has been a good way for me to tap into those and understand what I'm capable of.
I think you just answered this question for me, but I'm going to ask it in case you want to add anything else. Why should people start running?
For me, running is central in my life because what I'm capable of. And there's times where I'm driving to work on a Monday morning and I don't want to go because work is challenging and it stretches me and it's difficult. But I look up at those mountains that I've run 100 miles through and I think, man, if I can do that, I can probably go get through this Monday. Or there's times where, I've had to through tragedy or had to be a friend, be a shoulder to cry on for a friend. And things that I learned while on the trail or while running has really served me well in being able to help other people and as well.
And I know you and your family, you guys have had your share of tragedy, that's for sure. It's probably nice to know it's probably nice to know that you've got some inner strength when those things happen, because we can't control what's going to happen to us.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things that we have to do as humans is believe in ourselves. We're our own worst critics. We're themselves. And sometimes when you're able to run a race, as silly as that may be, but running 13.1 miles down Snow Canyon, I'm sure at some point, Kurt, you felt good about your efforts and that you were able to do 13.1 miles. And I think that that's one of the coolest things about this life that we live is finding those little things that are successes that you can build upon. I ran a race last weekend, and in any distance race, you're going to find a mental struggle. And I certainly found one on the rainy trails of the Sierra Nevada mountains. And I was really mentally struggling, and I coached myself to find one good thing. What was one positive thing that was happening? And I chose to look at the scenery. There was tall redwood trees that had moss on them. There was a mist coming through the forest. And I was like, to see what I'm seeing right now. Well, as my mind started to think of that one good thing, that led to two good things and three good things and four good things. And pretty soon I found myself at the finish line of a race that for a little while was in doubt because I was struggling. But if you can focus on the positive things in your life, things, what you're looking for is what you'll find.
Yeah. I started this channel, Mark, to motivate people, if that makes any sense. My hope is that these videos and podcasts, if there's a person out there that needs personal motivation, they can use these to help them find that. If there's a leader out there, may be that a teacher or a wrestling coach like myself, that needs a video, something he can share with one of his students or one of his wrestlers or football players, that he'll find that on this channel as this media grows. Or if there's an entrepreneur out there that needs that extra motivation for his team and for the guys working with him, that he might find a video he can share with them freely from this. And that's why I invited you on. And so far we've talked a lot about running and some things that you've taken from running that have helped you in real life. Not that running's not real life, but you know what I mean, having to make a living and provide for a family. And the takeaways I've taken from what you've said, let me recap them for the audience. And then if you want to add anything to this, please do. But based on the stories you've told, I think some takeaways that we can take, things that you've learned from running, and I can second that I've also learned some of these things in running, are one, conditioning of the mind. You talked about hardly being able to do a 5K, hardly being able to do a mile on the treadmill, to going out and doing 28 miles like it's nothing. And I've seen that happen with my running on a much smaller scale as well. But that transfers over to real life, where all of a sudden life's challenges, because you've conditioned yourself to deal with challenges and do hard things, they don't seem as hard until something bigger comes along, and then you condition for bigger and more challenging and making yourself better. That's one takeaway I've taken from what you've said. And one of the others is gratitude. You didn't word it like that, but that's how I took it. You talked about being on a tough run one time and just thinking about one positive thing. The first time I ever ran 13 miles was to get my locker when I was wrestling in college. And to get our locker, we had to do a 13-mile run. I had never done more than 5 before that, and so I didn't think I could do it. But as I was running, I actually just thought of all the things I was grateful for. I was actually praying in my head, and I thought about all the things I was grateful for. And before I knew it, the 13 miles was done. And I think that's a powerful takeaway, what you pointed out. If you think about positive things while you run, that it makes it less stressful and you're able to get through it, and it's a positive experience. And I think that carries over into real life. When you're having a challenge or having a tough time, if you can think and focus on the positives, be grateful for those things, pray if you're a praying person. If not, just be a grateful person, then it carries over. Those are the 2 main takeaways I've had. Is there anything else you would add of things you've learned from running that might help somebody in business, school, or real life?
I think those are 2 great. Back to the positive thing, I've experienced that in relationships too. So that's one thing that running has taught me, is to have relationships with those that are in my immediate circle of influence. And the reason is because I'm able to give quite a bit of thought to those people when you're on the trail. Wasatch took me 30 some odd hours, and that's a lot of time to think about the loved ones in your life. But there's people in that can drive us a little batty. And I'm sure if I asked you to think of one right now, you could. And one thing that I've challenged and stretched myself to do is to think about the good things in those people too. And the more that I'm able to do that, the more that I'm in each and every person that is in my circle of influence. And I'm not some altruistic hippie, but it's a better way to live for me, Kurt, and that's something I've learned from running. And so I would say not only look for the good in situations, but look for the good in people, because it is there. Some of the I've met in my life have been people that I've met on the trails in trail running. I never knew them before. We ran into each other on the trail, said, "Do you want to run a few miles?" And now I would consider them some of my deepest friends. So there's good in everything. We just have to look for it, and running's been my vehicle to be able to look for the good in things.
The running community is really amazing. To be honest, there's 2 communities I think are the best. It's wrestlers and runners, and you and I come from both worlds, but it's true what you said about that. They're the most uncompetitive competitive people I know, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I gave up long ago on beating Kenyon in a marathon. So the only person I'm really trying to beat is myself. I guess that's where I would is. For me, that's the best thing about running, is continuous improvement, and in life is crucial. Kurt, you've mentioned we wrestled. There's a rule in wrestling that is called stalling. And the rule book states that when one wrestler is not continuously improving, he's cautioned and then stalling. And I think about that all the time in my life, is I don't want to be stalling in life. And so I'm always trying to improve upon myself. And on my runs, I'm trying to get a faster time than I got the time before, or feel better on a run. And continuous improvement for me as a husband, as a father, as an employee, as a runner, as a friend is central.
That's a great place to end off, Mark. We'll end on that. But thanks for being here, Mark.
Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah, and you've come a long way since you were the most valuable slob at Slobfest.
Yeah, that's still my most prized possession.
That's awesome. That's awesome. If you want to know what we're referring to, Mark was the most valuable slob at Slobfest. In the description of the video here on YouTube, I will put a link to a video where you can see a different Mark Robbins from years ago, if you're interested.
Oh, brother.
Anyways, Mark, you're great. You're like an older brother to me growing up. You gave me the nickname Stinky Feet Clapier. Didn't live that one down for a while,
Yeah,
but
it was rough.
it was rough. But it's been good, man. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Kurt.
Okay, good luck on your training.
All right, you too. Go get that marathon, man.
I will in August. We'll see you.
Okay, sounds good. Talk to you later.
Bye.